Hi, I'm Jennifer Branch, and today I'm going to paint this beautiful picture of my dog playing in the snow. Let's paint. This painting's all about these blue-purple shadows that go across the landscape, and then these warm red leaves that pop up in the snow, and then the dog in shadow, but a little bit highlighted. So I'm starting out with some purple. The purple's slightly toned down with some cobalt blue just to make it very slightly cool. So even these trees they're very warm, they still have an underlying coolness, even though they're warm brown. A few, not exactly highlights, but almost on the tail, and then more blue on the underside there. It's just lovely contrast, isn't it? Now back here, it's definitely more blues. There's sort of a ditch here. And some of these, I don't want a harsh line there, so it's there because if it's on one side, it needs to be on the other side, but it disappears. Okay, so there's some nice bright greens in here. This just has a tinge, but I'm getting this wonderful pattern, and this blurs down to there. This connects, and then there's some warm lines going through that connect. And then this is definitely dark against there. And we'll put some warms in there, but all right, so I need to add some highlights around the edges here at the ear. One thing I'm going to do right from the start is reserve a couple of these highlights because I want to be able to paint right over them. I can go back with gouache, but I kind of want a shimmery effect, and I can't get that as well with gouache. This is one of those things that I need to slap my hand because I can see lots of highlights, and I can see some areas where maybe I'd like some highlights and there aren't. But if I go crazy, then I'm going to have too much going on in it. This is a very simple silhouette. All right, so I'm going to have a couple of these areas that maybe have a little bit more white than's really there. But remember, when you put wax on, it does not come off. I'm mixing some quinacridone rust with a little yellow ochre because it's time to start on those warm background colors. I want just a little blue in it just to tone it down a little bit. So there's these dark, shadowy, but hints of rusty red leaves in the snow. And they look a little stilted. Don't worry. I will always make sure if you put something like leaves in the snow, it's going to have a shadow. And you don't always paint the leaves and the shadow at the same time. So just give it a few minutes. Now I'm going to do some of the trees, kind of get that barely started. They have a very definite sun side and shadow side, so all of them. And then these that are laying down have a definite, there's snow piled up. Now some of the snow is in shadow, most of it's in bright light, but some of it's in shadow, so you have to allow for that. So it's white, but it's shadowed, and then there's the warm trunks underneath, and that's kind of interesting because they're going across it and breaking up the large expanse of snow. A few leaves underneath, and that rusty red is going to contrast beautifully. Bit more blues and purples. So mostly cobalt blue and cobalt violet. Some really interesting deep dark shadows. I'm just using some touches of ultramarine blue. It's very dark shadows, but they're more purpley blue, slightly chalky on the surface of the snow, so a little bit more in the cobalt family. Some quin rust for the leaves, lots of quin rust, lots of cobalt violet in this one. Just adding little bits of something. I want a lot of texture going on because the snow is so smooth that it needs to be just it needs to be interesting. Most of the interest is going to be with my dog Scout, but you have to have something going on. Otherwise, it just looks like a one textured area in the middle of this vast expanse of snow. So here I'm getting like the pre-painting, the prepping around this subject of the painting right now. Those warm colors, that's going to make the cool shadows stand out more. And always integrate the objects you're painting with the shadows around them and other shapes around them. Now I'm going to add a little bit more detail and a slightly more controllable brush. It's always fun when you get to paint the actual subject of the painting, and this is a particular favorite because he's my dog, so I think he's just the best dog in the entire world. His name's Scout, and he's an English Shepherd, which is what Border Collies and Australian Shepherds were bred from. So very smart, and he herds my boys beautifully. So a lot of texture on that fur. He's got the white flag on his tail, herding dogs traditionally. And the white really stands out against the black. That was supposed to be so that the sheep could see it. Now it's going to take a few layers to make it that inky black. You don't get dark colors in watercolor with just one layer, and really it's not the way to do it in oil either. If you build up those darks very, very slowly and mix all the different colors that make up black together, then you're going to have a much more interesting dark than you would any other way. Ink is great. I use black ink when I'm sketching, and that's a wonderful shortcut. It's wonderful for scribbling notes and doing little dashes and stuff like that to emphasize a sketch in a hurry. But for a really interesting dark, you want to build it up in many layers. So this initial layer is going to be very greenish, and then I'm going to tone it down later. Now that's definitely going to need a few layers or it's going to look green. Now here's the fun detail part. So you can't really see his eye in this. You know, he's got the cute white mask and all that sort of thing, but you can't see that eye. So don't paint things you can't see. If it's all in shadow, just leave it in shadow. Shadow blurs details. So, it's really cute in other lighting. But I'm doing the details with still the same number 14 brush, kind of big. I'm not going to get little dinky details quite yet. I'll size down for that. But I usually like to put them in fairly boldly to start because otherwise it can look a little bit fussy. And this is definitely not a fussy painting. This is a nice snow day painting with a few little details and lots of texture and interesting shadows. So I'm painting his nose, and I am leaving some holes in here for the just the reflection on the black, and the black hair, the black nose, all that has white reflections on it. So you need to allow for that. And remember, several layers. So you need to allow for doing several layers. My dog is pretty much always with me. He's under my feet, beside me. He's driving with me. He's always with me 99% of the time. It's wonderful since I do work from home and I have the two boys to herd. It's great to have someone always ready to go for a walk and be distracted from work, right? So lots more texture here. I got the bold shapes with the squirrel mop and lots of texture on that. But now I'm going back and I'm adding the smaller little things. You slowly build up in watercolor and oil. Actually, lots of people have different techniques. This is just mine. So I assume since you're watching this, you'd like to learn how I paint. I know that you will paint your own way and it will be fantastic. That's the really great thing about painting is that you get advice and you take lessons from everyone you possibly could that you like their work and you think it's good. And you copy things and you try them out. And after you've done that for a lot of different artists, then you develop your own style and it's all the things you like put together and it's completely different than anyone else's style that has ever painted. It's wonderful. It's one of the few things that you can do that the more you learn, the more unique you are. It's really starting to come together. There's a couple places like this is too light in here, and just a few more details that I want to add, and it'll be done. Now I'm trying to leave, I reserve some with white, but I'm trying to leave the dark right up next to that little bit of a highlight you get from the backlit sun. And because I did used wax, but you don't want to be too extravagant with wax or because you can't remove it, right? You want to be sparing with it, and you can always go back and add gouache, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for sunlight, if I possibly can, I like leaving the white of the paper because it's going to be brighter and it just looks really good. It sparkles compared to a lot of other things you can do. Now there are always other options, but okay, now notice I'm going back and I'm adding another layer to the fur. So the black fur that really was looking greenish. And when you get the slightly warmer tones on top of it, it's amazing, but it turns into a very dense black, but it still has those highlights. And I'm not, painting a solid wash on it. I'm doing a wash over maybe half of what I already painted on the black part of his body. And that makes it really glow a lot more because you have that fur. You know how fur's in kind of clumps? And some of those would have more shadow and some of those would be hit by the light a little bit more, and it gives that feeling. You're not painting something static. It's alive, it's moving. This is one of the few times he's still, but except when he's curled up under my feet, but you know, he really likes the snow. Okay, so I'm not painting the eye, but I am leaving a suggestion. And this is an area, for a dog, he has a super happy grin on his face. And I want to paint every detail of that, but I can't. It's not going to look right if I do that because he's in motion and you see little hints of it, and the hints are better than painting every detail. Now the eye, I do want in fairly great detail. I want to leave a little bit of white in there. If I don't, that's an area which actually looks quite nice, highlighted with gouache. So not a big deal either way. Sometimes it's better actually because it's that sheen. But I do want all the details there. And then there's a couple shadows under his chin, and what that does, those areas do, is it really makes it look three-dimensional. But it's white fur. He has bright, white, beautiful fur when he's not muddy. So I have to do this delicately. You don't want to just do tons of it because it has reflections from the warmth of the trees. It's got deep purple shadows, all these things at once. And you want to show that. So layers, many, many layers. So before I paint every single hair of fur on my dog, I think I better stop. It's really hard painting dog portraits as well as human portraits, and you want to get every little detail accurate, but it's the missing details that make the painting really good. So it's much harder to leave those out. So remember that. Even the really interesting, beautifully colored leaves. I hope this inspires you to paint, whether it's my dog, Scout, or whether it's your dog, who you could paint very much like this, especially if you're up north. And I just hope that you have some fun painting this weekend. For more information, please visit my website, paintingwatercolor.com. I have a lot of tutorials on there, so there's just tons of information, and I hope you enjoy it. And I hope you paint this weekend. Happy painting.